Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here for our first chapter reading, or should I say chapters of reading for a memoir, Shattered Dreams, My Life as a Polygamous Wife by Irene Spencer. If you haven't figured it out yet, this is the book that had the most votes, book number 2. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I apologize in advance for the noise you may hear. The kids are outside. It's nice outside, but this has to be out by tomorrow morning. And I said, you know what? I don't have any other time to read it than now. So go ahead, do me a favor and hit the like button as we begin. This is a tribute. How was this wrapped in paper, y'all? And this little thing is all, this is what I'm talking about. Yeah, you were wrapped up and you still have jacked up pages. To my precious children who made all my sacrifices worthwhile. Donna, Andre, Stephen, Brent, Kaylin, Barbara, Margaret, Connie, good gracious, LaSalle, Verlana, Seth, Lorthair, and my little angel Leah, and my special gift from God, Sandra, who are both now in heaven, but live also in my heart. And it's a picture of a bunch of kids. Y'all know I show the pictures. There's another picture here. To my husband, Hector J. Spencer, for allowing me to pursue my dreams, for loving all my children, and for always displaying a servant's heart. Thank you for making me not only your favorite wife, but your only wife. Okay, I'm interested already in hearing the story, since she put that little tidbit in there like, look, boo, thank you for not only marrying me, but for making me the only one. Acknowledgements. A special thanks to God, who drew me to himself through my suffering, heard my prayers, and rescued me from the years the locusts had eaten. Wow. Donna Goldberg, my beautiful, faithful daughter, without whose love and support I might not have lived to tell my story. God gave her to me to be my strength when I was weak, to need me when I felt unneeded. Without her persistent dedication and passion, this book never would have happened. I owe it all to her and her wonderful spirit. She truly is an angel. Thomas J. Winters, my incredible literary agent. Praise God for delivering him right out of the heavens and landing him into my life via sitting next to my precious granddaughter, Margaret LeBaron Tucker, on an airplane. Okay, so she's related to the LeBarons in some kind of way. Debbie Boyd, an earthly angel, for using her wings of expertise in helping my dreams take flight. Roloff Zetterstein of Hatchback Book Group USA and the staff for seeing value in my manuscript. Gary for letting my story touch his heart and for making it happen also perfectly. Susan for her invaluable input in editing skills. Maxine and Dwayne for being the first to read my manuscript and for giving me valuable help and encouragement. Bud for validating me as a writer and inspiring me to reach for the stars. Marilyn, who has been a dear friend and a pillar of strength I've admired throughout my journey. Seeing my potential years ago, she planted seeds of encouragement in me to write my own story. I think this is Ronita, Rhonita, who has compassion for those whose ideas and ideals differ from her own. Her light extinguished the shadows, and her smile created a warm atmosphere in which I could grow. Linda, my best friend for over 45 years, who promised she would never, ever marry my husband, no matter what. I appreciate such loyalty. I'll never have a more faithful friend who has walked my walk. Rebecca, my dear sister, who is always there to rescue and encourage me. I've appreciated her wisdom, love, and willingness to think outside the box. Brandy, my gorgeous granddaughter, for faithfully and tirelessly typing and retyping my manuscript. I've enjoyed the wonderful time of bonding and the laughter we shared. You're the best. Humor enables one to live in the midst of tragic events without being a tragic failure. Prologue. I edged sideways down the aisle of the crowded Greyhound, careful not to bump anyone with the bulky brown suitcase which held my every possession, 2 or 3 plain cotton dresses, my undergarments and toiletries, the sparse but precious contents of my hope chest. It may have been no great wonder, back in 1953, that a 16-year-old could stuff all she owned into one bag, but the fact that I was transporting my entire life to a new and faraway place felt momentous indeed. Checking my ticket for the correct seat number, I stopped at 12D, raised myself up onto my toes, and pushed the case onto the luggage rack above a heavy-set woman who smiled apologetically as she half stood and let me take the empty window seat next to her. I nodded and started to squeeze past, halting for one last look out the window opposite where my brother, Richard, and his pretty wife, Jan, stood in the dock bay, still waving me a half-hearted goodbye. I tried to smile back, may have smiled back, but when they dropped their hands to close, comforting arms around one another, I turned away for good and let the tears streaking my cheeks fall toward my own window. How I hoped it would show me a future beautiful and dependable, all worth all the sacrifice. With a loud snort of exhaust, the bus eased out of the station and turned down State Street toward the main highway, heading south out of Salt Lake City, south to Texas, then to Mexico, south to the ranch that would become my home, and south to my new husband, Verlin LeBaron, 23, tall, blonde, and handsome, even if his hairline had begun its retreat prematurely. At 23? With him, thus far, I'd spent exactly 3 nights, all of them covert, and those memories were now weeks old. Yet here I was, smuggling myself out of Utah, out of the country, in fact, and entrusting myself entirely to his hands, with nothing but a few vague and breathy promises of a better life to spur me on. That would be extremely scary to, 1, be a teenager, to 2, go to a completely different place away from your family, and 3, to another, it's not even state. She's going to another country, it sounds like. Afraid this might be my last glimpse of home, I took careful pains to register the landmarks streaming past the Hotel Utah, the tall brownstone, the Mormon-owned and run ZCMI department store, and Temple Square, with its giant gray granite buildings, secretive walls, lush gardens, and the gold leaf structure of the trumpet-blowing Angel Morano, the divine messenger who revealed the location of the Book of Mormon. I don't know if I said that name right. Moroni. Is it Moroni? To our prophet Joseph Smith back in 1823. Most beloved of all was the majestic backdrop of the mountains formed as their gigantic cliffs rung the valley in which Brigham Young had his companions nestled our city. The ache in my heart became a sharp hurt as the symbol of steadfast and strength, which had long anchored my horizon, eventually drifted out of sight. I offered a silent prayer. God, give me the courage to stand as firm as my Mormon forefathers. Leaning back in the swaying seat, I closed my eyes, hoping to ward off the surge of homesickness already enveloping me. My mother, along with most everyone else I loved, didn't even know of my marriage. I told even fewer that I was moving to the LeBarons' Mexico homestead. Oh, we know we heard some stuff about those LeBarons. We, Verlin and Charlotte and I, didn't consider it safe to tell. Besides, by keeping it secret, I avoided all the subversive "I told you so's" I was sure would have greeted my news. Still, how would I fare in such a strange place with only these 2 to care about me? That in itself was no given at this point, that either of them would really care. One was the husband I barely knew. The other was the wife who had him first. As the gloom crept over me, I pressed a hand against my fluttering stomach and tried massaging the knotted fear within. I determined to concentrate only pertinent worries like making it through the next 24 hours until I arrived in El Paso and crossed over the border into Mexico. Since my every step now was an act of sheer obedience to God, perhaps I could presume He'd protect me through it all. In the meantime, I'd have hours to pray for strength I need to take the next steps. Oh God, help me to be unflinching in this scared commitment I've made. I wonder what made her made the commitment and she was so scared. I wonder if it was something that was forced upon her or what, but I guess we'll find out. The din of the vibrating bus motor eventually lulled me calm enough to look at my fears a bit more objectively. I've been trying too hard to be brave, and in that I'd largely succeeded so far. I never much lacked for courage, but my fundamentalist Mormon faith taught wives to be sweet, patient, and above all, never jealous. Isn't that what it's said? It's so easy to say it when it's men don't have to worry about that. It's just the women who are told these things. I had to be honest. It was not simply the prospect of seeing my new husband again that spawned my dark cloud of worry. More than anything else, I dreaded moving in on the wife who staked her claim to him 2 years prior to mine. In truth, I barely claimed him yet at all. And though I was livelier than she was and quite determined to fulfill him, just how was I going to get my fair share of him with her always around? And help me to be sweet, patient, never ever jealous. I told myself I should be thankful she was no stranger to me. She was my half-sister after all. That alone is cringy to me. I've said this before in other books. I love my sister, but we are not sharing a man. We could share, well, I was going to say clothing, but she's smaller than me. We can share hair accessories. We can share jewelry. We can share shoes, but her foot is bigger than mine. Either way, we can share certain things. A man would not be one of those things. Somehow, this didn't help. I still felt like being selfish, and I felt plenty bad about feeling it. God commanded our people to live plural marriage or be damned forever. The revelation came directly through the prophet Joseph Smith in 1843. I reveal unto you a new and everlasting covenant, and if ye abide not that covenant, then ye are damned, for no one can reject this covenant and be permitted to enter the glory. Doctrine and Covenants 132:4. Polygamy was a necessary sacrifice we all had to make in order to attain godhood and avoid hell. So I'd been told. Yes, I've been told it and told it and told it. As the bus wandered past still familiar fields of brown and green, I wandered back through my childhood in search of the words so persuasive to me. Perhaps they would persuade me now. That is that part. So far, she's got me. I'm already enjoying how she brought it in. Book 1, Called to be a Goddess. Chapter 1. As we were growing up, polygamy was the ruling tenet of our lives. This celestial law was so integral to who we were and what we were trying to accomplish that most often we referred to it simply as the principle. Everything else we were to do or not to do, be or not to be, a great deal as it turns out, was to this. Men were to have as many wives and as many children as they possibly could during the few years they walked this earth. It was upon the conclusion of those trying earthly years that we would all reap the divine rewards for our obedience to the principle. As children, we were not just taught to honor the principle, we were taught to claim it as our birthright. This is the thing that makes this hard for a lot of them to get out of, is it's ingrained upon them so early that they know nothing else because this is all they're taught. They're scared kind of into it. We were born into it. No conversion was necessary. You are God's chosen ones, his special children of the covenant. We were told at home and at Sunday meeting, during visits to and from friends, and in all the literature we were allowed to read. We consequently viewed with great suspicion the few strange souls who occasionally tried to join our ranks from the outside. More likely than not, they were mere deviants, men who got off on the idea of God-sanctioned sex with multiple women who were bound by oath to endure it. These were not children of the principle. Children of the principle understood that polygamy was all about future glory. I was born into a fourth generation polygamous family on February 1st, 1937, a day that lay frozen under the white shroud of typical Utah winter. I ended up a middle kid, 13th of 31 born to my father, 4th of the 6 born to my mother. I was mother's long-awaited first daughter. After me, she had 2 more. Mother was the second of Dad's 4 wives. Rhea Allred, his first wife, it might be Rhea, R-H-E-A, a powerful position within many polygamous families, was a smashing brunette with beautiful brown eyes who believed heartily in the principle and was determined to live it. My grandfather, Harvey, who favored both her and my mother by different wives, wouldn't let Dad marry her until he promised just one thing, to live plural marriage. Outside our Mormon fundamentalist circle, this would have been an unthinkable stipulation to put on a prospective groom, particularly one wanting to marry your daughter. But among children of the covenant, a commitment to polygamy had to come first. Dad complied, initially by word and later by action. So my mother, Olive, was my aunt Rhea's, I said Rhea or Rhea? I'm going to say Rhea. Rhea's half-sister. In obedience to the principle, Aunt Rhea urged and ultimately persuaded Mother to marry her husband, my father, Morris Q. Kunz, K-U-N-Z. This was one of the more vexing contributions polygamous women were called on to make, the recruitment of new wives into their husbands' households. After all, only so many women were born into the principle, and each man was commanded to wed as many of them as he could. There was terrible competition. Worried husbands needed assistance, particularly as they aged and grew thicker in the middle, as well as thinner in the wallet. A righteous woman who mastered the sin of jealousy and could effectively court others on her husband's behalf was a prize worth having. Generally, she could accomplish it only with her eternal rewards square into her sights. Devout Aunt Rhea managed to do her part, so Mother and Rhea were half-sisters who then became sister wives. So this half-sister thing, it just seems to go on from generation to generation, because we know in the book that we read, Love Times 3, there were twin sisters in that one. So this just seems to be a thing. 21 on her wedding day, relatively old by polygamous standards, Mother was a lovely blue-eyed blonde. One might think 2 beautiful wives would be enough for any man, but in polygamy, nothing is ever enough. That's true. It seems like a lot of them are never satisfied. A couple of years after he married Mother, Dad married Ellen, who he had met only days earlier. And And another 2 years after that. While Ellen was still taking up with the birth of their second child, Dad married 15-year-old Rachel Jessups, his 4th wife. He was 2 months shy of 28 at the time. I still got a problem with these young girls marrying these older men. What is a 15-year-old doing getting married in the first place? I know it happened back in the day, because I think my great-grandmother was 15 when she got married, but she wanted to. 15 years old and you're getting married and he's 28 and he already has all these wives. The principle was neither a license for male promiscuity, though it sometimes felt like it, nor a call to surfing. What? Though it quite often felt like that. In harmony with our teaching that as man is, God once was, and as God is, man may become, the principle was quite simply the way of God. Many earthly Mormons believe this planet was given to Adam as a reward for his own obedience to the celestial law on some other world. Adam, known prior to his earthly incarnation as Michael the Archangel, was granted the status of a god because of his righteous life. Okay, this goes back to somebody telling me that Christianity and this aren't the same. I'm seeing that now. Earth was to be his domain, and the wives and the children he acquired on that other world were to help him populate this one, which he would then rule over as God the Father, spoken of in the Christian scriptures. Adam came to earth with one of his celestial wives to begin mortal life for their spirit children. Their primary mission was to procreate and populate their world, providing bodies to all their spirit children so those children would have the opportunity to work out their own salvation. Okay, so when we hear Robin talk about how she has spirit children that she feels like are still left, this kind of has something to do with that. Adam chose Jesus, the firstborn of his innumerable offspring in the pre-existence, to be the second member of the Trinity, the third being the Holy Spirit. Wow, this is really different. While here on earth before he was sacrificed for the sins of humanity, Jesus himself had at least 2 wives, Mary Magdalene being one of them. Okay. When Jesus returns to resurrect the dead, he will exalt to the highest level of celestial glory all male children of the covenant who have succeeded well in living in the principle. They will become gods of their own worlds. A man who acquires at least 2 wives in this life is thought worthy of being such a god, and one with 7 or more, called a quorum, Quorum, is practically assured of it. The wives and children sealed to the deserving man while on earth will assist him in populating the world he is given to rule over in the next link of his godhood chain. The larger his family here, the better head start they'll have there. There were even mechanisms in place for marrying off dead women by proxy. This was thought to add to the prestige of the polygamous men to whom these women were married. Women could not become gods in their own right. A woman's hope lay solely in being a wife and mother, one of the many wives to her husbands, mother of many, many of children. That's how you know this religion was created by a man, because ain't no way. I'm sorry. The more and more that I learn about this, it's clear as to why so many label this as a cult. She thereby contributes to her husband's future kingdom and will ultimately share in his glory as a goddess, an immortal being who will rule under him and alongside her sister wives for eternity. A woman is dependent on her husband, God, to pull her through the veil of death into heaven and divinity. Polygamous women whose husbands for some reason do not merit becoming gods can be sealed to other worthy men. How? Unmarried women and monogamous women can look forward to being angels in the next life. Angels are forever single and childless, ministering servants to the gods, and part of the celestial audience attendant at others' earthly weddings. This was the gospel of the early Mormons as they were taught it. Wow. Dad was a fireman whose family understandably grew much faster than his paycheck, an almost universal problem among polygamists. On Dad's salary, there was no way he could afford separate households for each of his wives. This also was common. Wives always needed, wanted, and at times demanded privacy for themselves and their own broods. But polygamous husbands could rarely afford that for very long, especially as they got deeper into living out the principle. Yeah, because you got all these additional mouths to feed and you're not making money in order to feed it. So as a result of that, a lot of them are living in poverty. Different compromises were struck in different households. In ours, for a time, the solution was a half-finished fourplex that accommodated all of Dad's wives. He built it himself with the help of a few friends on some acreage he bought in the small Mormon community of Murray, Utah, just outside Salt Lake, a spot his 4 families came to call the farm. For a few months during the construction of the fourplex, my mother, brothers, sisters, and I lived in our neighbor's chicken coop. In the chicken coop? What? I was only 4 years old. The night lightning flashes from... I was only 4 years old. The night lightning flashes from a threatening line of thunderstorms woke me. Soon the rain was seeping through the coop's torn, tar-papered roof, soaking me to the skin. The next day we moved into our house, though its rooms still lacked even partitions or plaster. We used blankets for dividers, but at last, Dad had his whole family under one roof. Aunt Rhea and Mother lived upstairs while wives 3 and 4 lived below. Eventually, each would have their own all-important and much-utilized kitchen. We thought of a fourplex, fairly comfortable arrangement for everyone concerned. Still, my 4 mothers suffered in ways I was too young to understand. It took just one night for us to discover that our old mattress had been contaminated while we'd been sleeping in the chicken coop. When we moved into the house, the bed bugs came right along with us. Oh, Lord. Bed bugs? I'm itching already just hearing that. We children cried, thrashing around all night, scratching our bites until they bled. Mother turned on the lights and killed the vermin as we squirmed beneath the covers. I can still remember the unique stench of squashed bed bugs because they were feeding on them. The next morning, Mother hauled the mattress into the August sun and searched each one individually. She stretched the seams where the creatures hid and multiplied, and then she poured hot scalding water from her tea kettle down the folds of the mattress on the sides. After the hot sun dried them, Mother returned them to our bedroom, but the pesky bugs kept snacking on us. Yeah, because you ain't kill them. You needed to get rid of the mattress. I'd rather sleep on the floor than go through that. Gracious. That's like mosquitoes constantly biting at you. Ooh, I'll keep itching. And she finally realized they had migrated into the framed walls. Oh, wow. Never mind. The mattress it was all over the place, hiding where the 2x4s were nailed together. She fought them continually until the day we moved away. So the bugs were in the walls? I didn't even know bed bugs could be anywhere but the bed. That sounds ignorant. I meant furniture or whatever. I didn't think that they would be in the walls. Wow. The things you don't think about. I know termites would. Okay, let me focus. Despite the long hours he put in, Dad's modest income always fell far short of our needs. To make up for it, Mother and her sister wives had to be on their toes working as a team. Creativity and compassion also came in pretty handy. On many occasions, they had to pull together for mere survival. One opportunity for some major pulling together came in 1942, a year in which winter arrived early and set in heavy along the Wasatch Mountains, Wasatch. A late September snow that year caught 3 pregnant wives unexpectedly. Rachel, Ellen, and Rhea were all with child and couldn't work outside in the cold. This left my mother to do all the harshest chores for the ever-growing family. Oh boy, that's a lot. Girl, you like suffering was her life. In this bitter cold, Mother gathered fuel for the stove. She recruited 3 of the older children from Rhea and Ellen's families and 2 of her own. Though they lacked rubber boots for their feet or hats for their bare heads, their mothers tried to bundle the workers up, pulling odd stockings over their hands for gloves. These stretched up to their elbows and were held in place by their tattered secondhand coats. Goodness gracious. Thus, oh, wow. The ragtag work team emerged from our fourplex and traipsed along silently in the freshly fallen snow, each member carrying a gunny sack. They snuck into a neighbor's orchard, lured there by its stark bare tree, and then scoured the white fields for already fallen, more flammable plunder. Breaking branches into small enough lengths to fit in the cloth sacks, they worked for over an hour as the small children's hands became numb. Mother spurred them to hold their sacks open while she could fill each one, shoving in just the amount each child could carry home. When I saw the red faces and the stiff, cold hands of the work crew as it returned home, I was glad my mother ignored my tearful pleas to go along. Those kids didn't even have the proper clothing or shoes to go out there in those freezing conditions. And not only are they going out there, but they're going out there for a long period of time to work. Each morning, Mother would repeat this. Gunny sacks in hand, she'd take a few of us on a walk, and we pick up old shoes, pieces of crates, and broken branches along the way, always trying to gather enough fuel for the day's needs. When we were lucky, the scavenged odds and ends would burn long enough in one stove for each wife to have a turn cooking. Sometimes there wasn't enough for them to light 4 separate fires in their kitchens. This was just as well. The warmth from that one wood stove generally took the chill off the room in which we huddled together for comfort during those cold winter months. They didn't even have heat. With the four wives humbled themselves before God daily, asking and waiting for him to supply their needs as it became more apparent that Dad could not. At some point, we were left with cornmeal as our only staple, though once each week we could get a 2-day supply of watered down milk. Mother finally decided that it just wasn't good enough. One day, she announced she was taking 3 of the older kids with her, and they would return only after they found something with which to feed the family. Aunt Rhea took her aside and scolded her for building up our hopes falsely, but Mother was determined to procure anything she could to nourish the famished tribe. Having done God's bidding for 11 years now, she expected him to come through for her in this dark hour. Tucking 3 heavy paper grocery bags under her arm, she led the way out the door and headed toward the nearby fields where new houses were fast going up. Mother sang praises to Almighty as they marched along. She recited a Bible verse, asserting, "Ye have not because ye ask not." With what little personal experiences in prayer the children had, they implored their Maker to send them some rations. As they approached the construction area, Mother saw a man with a wheelbarrow coming in their direction. She received a premonition and exclaimed to the kids, "I know that whatever that man is dumping on the ground is the answer to our prayers." My siblings waited quietly while the man returned to his garage, then came back out with his wheelbarrow full a second time. He dumped the contents on top of the first load and then went back inside. He hadn't seemed to notice the little clan standing by, stomping their feet and eyeing his debris. Mother waited about 10 minutes until she was satisfied that the man had completed his job. She had no clue what he had deposited, but she knew it would soon be hers. When she thought it safe, they made a run for it. Mother wanted to cry with joy as she knelt before the heap. Sure enough, God gave us heavenly manna, a magnificent pile of dirty, sprouting potatoes. If she managed it right, this windfall would feed Dad's family for 2 full weeks. So here is something that this guy doesn't even feel is worth keeping, or, well, I don't know if he feels it's worth keeping or not. It's something that he dumped. And here she is, excited about it and can use it to feed her family. The gleeful kids loaded up their paper bags. Mother instructed them to walk the potatoes home slowly so the bags wouldn't tear open and scatter our treasure down the street. They should then return to the potato pile with our empty wicker baby buggy and 2 strong gunny sacks, being extra quiet on the way back so as not to draw the attention of any of our nosy, monogamous Mormon neighbors. Mother couldn't bear letting those disapproving tongue waggers see us scrounging out such a minimal existence. But the emotions of the 3 hungry children ran high. They made a clatter probably heard for a block as they raced along behind the raggedy buggy, preoccupied with tantalizing visions of hot potato soup. They're excited about potatoes, y'all. Put that into context. Not knocking it, because I love a good potato myself. But the kids are excited because they're going to have potatoes. Because they're used to cornmeal. The Mormon Church sludged off many of its basic beliefs beginning late in the 19th century, largely under pressure from the civil authorities who outlawed the practice of polygamy, which many Mormons consider integral to their faith. For a brief time after 1890, when they issued the first manifesto renouncing plural marriage, even some of the church leaders continued to privately profess and practice the principle. They had sent believers to form polygamous colonies across the western United States and as far away as Mexico with orders to safeguard the faith. But political pressures eventually prevailed. A second manifesto in 1904 ended the practice of polygamy within the Mormon Church, now called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or just Latter-day Saints, LDS. The command to live plural marriage was suspended. LDS men were to have only one wife. Torn between God's law and man's law, those who refused to give up plural marriage had to go into hiding. Some of them fled to Mexico. Others went underground within their own communities. Despite the transformed doctrines of the LDS Church, these spiritual refugees considered themselves the true Mormons, the faithful followers of Joseph Smith and his initial converts. Their mission now was urgent: to persevere the faith in a time of dark apostasy. More than ever, they believed the principle must be lived and lived strictly. Known as the fundamentalists, we were their descendants. By the time I came along, fundamentalist Mormons were a huge embarrassment to the LDS Church, and the fundamentalists, in turn, both resented and envied the LDS. We considered ourselves the chosen ones, the pure in heart, the true Zion. And the LDS, having abandoned the principle, were merely worldly. In a way, they were worse than the world, since they'd once known the light and gave it up. We prayed for their return. In the meantime, we hid, and we hid well. We had to eat and breathe the principle, continually pumping ourselves up in it so we could withstand the world and the church thinking it wrong. We shielded ourselves from outside influences and tried hard to value persecution as proof of our righteousness. One form persecution took was exclusion from our own temple. The temple the prophet Brigham Young, successor of Joseph Smith, longed to see finished throughout the years he faithfully lived and taught plural marriage. The only polygamists ever allowed in now were those masquerading as LDS members or who had not yet personally acted on the principle. Yes, the LDS apostates chose the easy path, leaving us to slink about in the shadows, and then they had the nerve to treat us as undesirables. How well I still remember my first day of school. Before that morning, I'd only left the farm to visit the homes of family friends, to go to Sunday meetings, also at friends' homes, and on one very special occasion, to attend a family picnic at Murray Park. The expedition to Lincoln Elementary School would be my debut into the world, an event mandated by the state, anticipated by me, and feared by my family. The adults in our household worked hard to prepare us. You are special, chosen ones, they told us, even more often than usual. Very few of your classmates will be children of the covenant, so you will have to be careful of them. Don't let them influence you. Don't listen to their talk or play their games or read their books. Remember, you are chosen. You must keep yourself pure. Now, don't feel bad if they call you names. Don't read their books, because if you read their books, you might find out that a lot of what we're teaching you isn't the only way to go. They may call you names. We have to welcome persecution. It just proves you're the chosen ones, not them. Oh, and don't talk to anyone about the principle. When the time came, we, the eldest 13 of 21 children born to my father thus far, left our fourplex in a park and began the trek to the school. I walked, I just spilled some water. I walked between Joseph and Mary, holding their hands, as excited as we were united. The three of us had all turned 5 and were going to begin kindergarten. I had on my new blue and white checkered dress, homemade from printed flour sack material. My brother, Richard's worn tennis shoes that were a size too big, and ribbons in my braided hair. Our older siblings told us younger ones to walk fast and ignore the insults from the teenage kids who ran past, throwing rocks at us and yelling, "Ha ha ha, there go the pligs." I didn't understand what plig meant, but I found out later it was short for polygamous. But by then, the way my brothers and sisters acted, I knew it was meant to be a dirty word. It was a label I'd be branded with for years to come. Knowing myself to be a special child of God, I always loved to wonder why these kids would be so cruel to me. My 10-year-old brother Roger escorted Joseph, Mary, and me to the unfamiliar kindergarten classroom. It was the teacher's first year at the school. Roger gave her our birth certificates and a paper with our address and phone number on it. After he left for his own class, the teacher smiled, looking at our papers, and asked, "You're triplets, aren't you?" I, being the bravest of the three, answered, "No, ma'am." "Are any of you twins?" I shook my head. "No." A bewildered look crossed her face. "How can you be brothers and sisters and all be 5? I wondered how the teacher could be so stupid. We've all got the same father. We live in the same house. But Mary's mom is Ellen, Joseph's mom is Rachel, and my mom is Olive. I'll never forget her horror. She stammered, You mean your father has 3 different wives?" She looked shocked. I answered obediently, "Yes, ma'am." Gasping, she continued, "You mean to tell me he lives with all 3 wives in the same house?" I thought maybe she was sliding my dad's first wife, Aunt Rhea, so I clarified, "Oh no, my dad..." Children are so innocent, man. "Oh no, my dad has 4 wives." Then I added, bragging, "But tonight it's his turn to sleep with mom." The new teacher got up from her desk and left the room to confer with the school principal, who it turned out was familiar with polygamous children because they'd infiltrated his school in the past. While we waited for the teacher's return, the whole class kept staring at the 3 of us. Young as I was, I felt something was amiss. I began to suspect we weren't being given the respect chosen children of God deserved. By lunchtime, my classmates had poked such fun at me about my floppy tennis shoes and our many mothers that I was finally reduced to tears. Later that same year, I was kneeling down and accidentally stepped on my fading flour sack dress, tearing the seam at the waist and revealing my flour sack panties. I was sick about being seen that way by the other children. My teacher supplied a couple of safety pins to hold the torn skirt in place, but the damage had been done. You know what's sad about all of this? And I understand that this was years ago. I just feel like a lot of these teachers weren't taught to be sensitive to situations. And even if you don't agree with something, to put a child on the spot like that and to do that, it's just uncalled for. And I hope now that they teach a little bit more sensitivity to these situations, but you never know. Our polygamy and our poverty made us different, but it also bonded us to each other, especially as our sense of conspicuousness and persecution heightened. We got by on bare necessities, sometimes wanting even for those, while the other kids routinely enjoyed what we knew were great blessings. A new pair of shoes to start each school year, store-bought clothes, and now and then the acceptance of our teachers, administrators, and one another. I began to hate school and too long for the safety of home. We had only one car, which Dad took every day to work. His wives rode the bus when they had to go shopping or do other errands, and the rest of us rarely went anywhere except to school and to meet or visit with other fundamentalists. Extracurricular school activities were generally off limits as well. All we were allowed to read, aside from what we were assigned by our teachers, were the Mormon scriptures and a running exposition of those scriptures titled Truth Magazine, published monthly by one of our dear fundamentalist brethren. By Mormon scriptures, I refer loosely to the Book of Mormon, divinely received, translated, and passed down by our prophet Joseph Smith. The Doctrine and Covenants, a collection of literature on the Mormon faith, and the Revelations on the church governances. The Christian Bible, as corrected by Smith, is the inspired vision and other Mormon books, such as the Pearl of Great Price, the Journal of Discourses, and later the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith. These form the inventory of our indoctrination. My Aunt Rhea was the spiritual engine within our household. She was pious, serious, and devoted to the principle. Sure, it was the only way to please God and attain glory. She meant for the rest of us to be pious, serious, and devoted to the principle as well. Whenever I got up early enough in the morning, I could find Aunt Rhea still poring over her scriptures or the newest Truth magazine, steeling herself on the proper ends and means for living plural marriage. These truths, moreover, were the topic of most every conversation I was privy to whenever friends came by for visits or when we were visiting. The adults discussed the principle while they cooked and while they sewed, and we prayed about it daily as a family. At Sunday meetings, we children were divided and taught the principle in age-appropriate doses and concentrations, while in the main room, the grown-ups were reminded weekly why they were doing what they were doing and how to do it better. Every precept at every level of our comprehension seemed to support that the central call on our lives to live polygamy. They just ingrain it in them. They beat it in them without hitting them, I'm saying, but they make sure that it's something that they constantly hear. Here's just a sample of the truths that over time became even more real to us than our hunger or our jealousy or the disdain of our neighbors. As chosen vessels, God, we were held in heaven of God. We were held in heaven to come forth in these latter days to live the celestial law. In fact, while our spirits were still with God in the pre-existence, we chose to be born at this precise time for the very purpose of living polygamy. 2, we were to stay separate from the world, keeping ourselves innocent of its culture, values, and various entanglements. 3, we were to obey God at all times and costs, even if we had to break the laws of the land to do it. The prophet Brigham Young emphasized that we should be welcomed for persecution, for if it ceased, we could be sure we had fallen from God's favor, which is one of the reasons why, with like Warren Jeffson them, they thought that they were doing things right because of the persecution that he was receiving when it had nothing to do with that. All men who reached the age of 18 were to be received into the higher priesthood if they also believed the Mormon scriptures, prayed faithfully, obeyed the word of wisdom, did not smoke or drink coffee, tea, or alcohol, and pledged to practice plural marriage. These men, also referred to as the brethren, were thereby competent to participate in the priesthood activities and to get married, lead their families, and receive God's divine revelations. Isn't it interesting how they had to be 18 in order for that to happen, but girls were 15 and being married? Women were only to marry men who held the priesthood, see? Because no one else could pull them through the veil. Once married wives had to obey their husbands strictly. Number 6, the brethren were to be respected and obeyed, their wisdom and dictates never questioned. After all, they were the vehicles of God's priesthood and served as mouthpieces. 7, we were to be loyal to the brethren and protect them from the scrutiny and interference of outsiders at all times. In short, we were never to talk about our fundamentalist brothers and sisters to anyone. These various components of our gospel may not have been set out for us quite so bluntly, but this was their gist. It was a handy bunch of mandates for safeguarding such a countercultural lifestyle, but sometimes it was an awful lot to put on children. When I got older, my father and 4 of his wives lived near another larger polygamous family. My association with these kids was mostly on Sundays when both families met together in the Kelsch, K-E-L-S-C-H home to be taught the gospel. One particular Saturday morning, 7 of Dad's kids took off running to Murray Park with 8 of the Kelsch kids trailing our heels. We wanted to be the first in line for free swimming lessons, so we got there early and waited for almost an hour for the swimming pool to open. Finally, a slim, severe-looking woman in a blue one-piece bathing suit unlocked the gate. She instructed us to stay in line and keep the noise down. Joseph, Mary, and I signed up first. The 3 of us were now 10-year-olds. Next was my sister Rula, who was 12, sisters Nan and Norma, who were both 8, and Millie, 7. We 7 gave the woman our same address. This went along pretty well and without incident until the 8 Kelsch kids started signing up. 2 were 6, 2 were 8, 2 were 10, and 2 were 12. It was then the swimming teacher realized all 15 kids had only 2 last names and 2 addresses. She threw her pen down with an air of authority and said, "Somebody here is trying to be funny. I'll send every one of you home, and you can't swim unless you tell me the truth." The air went dead. We've been cautioned never to tell anyone we were polygamous unless it was emergency. I reasoned instantly that since Mother and Dad couldn't pay for swimming lessons and these were free, the truth had to be told. As far as I could see, this was an emergency. Acting as spokesperson, I stepped closer to the table. I lowered my voice, trying to avert any more of the uncalled for attention we already received. "Lady," I stuttered, hoping she was smart enough to understand. "We have different mothers, but we have the same dad." To avoid further complication, I added, "We really do have the same address. It's the same with the Kelch kids," and she looked more dumbfounded with each word I spoke. Picking up her pen, she tilted her head at a quizzical angle and interpreted me mid-sentence. She pointed to the 2 10-year-old Kelch kids. "Your half-brother," she asked, astounded. They nodded. "Now you 2 are half-brothers, right?" she asked the 12-year-olds. They nodded. She got excited, clearly thinking she finally figured this mess out. She thrust her pen at each age group in rapid succession, using it to separate them as she went along. "Now you're half." They nodded. "You're full." And "You're half." Her pen went back and forth. Finally, she yelled at little 8-year-old Dale Kelch, whose mind by this time had wandered onto other things. "Hey, kid, are you full?" He looked up at her in total earnestness and said in a timid voice, "No, ma'am, I'm hungry." We all broke up laughing as the lady sat there with a dazed look on her face. Finally, in disgust, she waved her arms, giving us all permission to go into the pool. After that confusion, I realized why Dad always refused to allow us to call one another half-brothers or half-sisters. To him, and eventually to us all as well, all of his children were simply brothers and sisters. That's how we were raised. We were raised not to, because we're not, my dad always said, "You're not half of a person." So we were raised to just call each other brother and sister, just like how it was done on both sides of my family before that. Because, okay, I'm giving too much of my business. Anyway, we were raised that that's your sister, that's your brother, that's not your half anything. As I got older, I began to stew about some of our fundamentalist doctrines. If Adam was God, for example, whom did he disobey? I was told such questions show disrespect and lack of faith. Be quiet and believe. Because she's questioning things and she's realizing something isn't matching up here, she's supposed to shut up and be quiet. Interesting. Be quiet and believe, I would hear from my older brothers and my devout Aunt Rhea. Another time, I actually raised my hand in Sunday school class and asked how it could be that the godly brethren we knew, all of whom were someone's son, could one day receive their own worlds to populate and rule, and at the same time be required to help their fathers to populate theirs. This question was disallowed, and I learned quickly that our faith had more to do with righteous practice than understanding. My worries turned from the beliefs themselves to how well we were living them. We were succeeding, and when my turn came, I would know what to do and be able to do it. And that is where I'm going to stop. Looks like her chapters are going to be longer and that she kind of jumps a little bit. But so far, so good. You know, normally with these books, it takes a little bit of time to pick it up. I'm hoping that we enjoy it. We got a lot of books, so we'll see. Let me know your thoughts down below. Like the video as it helps the channel. Until next time.